The night the stars changed, no one noticed at first. Not the astronomers with their telescopes aimed at distant galaxies. Not the farmers out tending their crops under the sprawling skies. Not even those staring directly at the heavens, lost in the beauty of constellations. But when the sky rippled like water, a shimmering distortion swallowing entire sections of the universe, the world took notice. It began in silence. No explosions, no apocalyptic trumpets, just a quiet unraveling of the familiar. The stars dimmed, their lights snuffed out one by one until the sky was left hauntingly bare. Then came the ships, massive constructs of obsidian and iridescent steel, their surfaces alive with flowing patterns that twisted and shifted like molten metal. They materialized without warning, descending from the void as if the universe itself had birthed them. And from those ships came them. The day they arrived, I was working a late shift at the docks in Port Laren. Loading crates, sweating under the buzz of fluorescent lights, the distant hum of the cargo ship engines drowning out the silence of the night. The first ship was a dark stain against the sky, a vast silhouette blocking out what few stars remained. At first, we thought it was a storm front, low and churning, but then the lights appeared, columns of brilliant blue descending in beams to the earth below. "Is that?" Mendez, the foreman, dropped his clipboard, squinting toward the horizon. His voice trailed off as the ground beneath our feet began to vibrate. Before anyone could answer, the beams struck down into the heart of the city. There was no sound, no explosion, just light, sharp and unyielding, swallowing entire buildings whole. People screamed. Vehicles crashed. The hum of the ships became a deafening roar as they came closer. "Move! Everyone move!" Mendez bellowed, but we were frozen in place, our heads craned skyward as the ship loomed above. The underside opened, revealing a kaleidoscope of moving parts, glowing conduits and rotating spheres. And then they emerged. They were tall, impossibly so, with elongated limbs and eyes that glowed like coals. Their skin shimmered, shifting between colors like oil on water, and their movements were fluid, almost hypnotic. They didn't speak, not at first. They didn't need to. The moment they set foot on the docks, a wave of something intangible washed over us, a pressure in the mind, a sense of submission. My knees buckled, and I dropped to the ground, gasping for air as my thoughts scattered like leaves in a storm. The others fell too, one by one, until we were all on our knees, staring up at them in terror. Humans? The word wasn't spoken but delivered directly into my mind, a voice that felt like it had always been there, ancient and commanding. "You are ours now." By the time the resistance formed, the invaders had already solidified their grip on Earth. Cities were transformed into towering monoliths of alien design, with spires that reached into the clouds and streets pulsing with strange, otherworldly light. Their technology was beyond anything we could comprehend, machines that reshaped matter with a thought, drones that patrolled the skies like silent predators, and a network of psychic control that kept humanity in check. At first, people tried to fight back. Militias rose up in defiance, armed with rifles and grenades, but they were no match for the invaders. Whole towns were wiped off the map, their populations erased as if they had never existed. The rest of us were left to fall in line, subjugated by the unrelenting force of their will. But not everyone gave up. In the shadows, far from the prying eyes of the invaders, pockets of resistance began to form. Scientists, engineers, soldiers, anyone who still had a spark of rebellion left in them. We called ourselves the Architects, not because we were building something, but because we were planning to destroy everything. I found myself among them after what happened at the dock. They had taken Mendez and the others, their minds too fractured to resist the invaders' psychic grip. I had barely escaped, stumbling into the wilderness with nothing but the clothes on my back and a burning hatred in my chest. That's where they found me, battered and broken, but still willing to fight. "Explain it to me again," I said, my voice laced with frustration. We were huddled in an abandoned warehouse, surrounded by stolen alien tech and blueprints scrawled across the walls. The hum of a generator filled the space, along with the acrid smell of burnt circuits. Dr. Kwan, the leader of our cell, sighed and pushed her glasses up the bridge of her nose. The invaders' control network is psychically linked to their ship. If we can disrupt the network, we can break their hold on the population. How? I asked, glancing at the strange device she was working on. It looked like a weapon, but unlike anything I had ever seen, smooth and organic, almost alive. By turning their own technology against them, Kwan replied, a glint of determination in her eyes. This device emits a counterfrequency that disrupts their psychic signals. If we can get close enough to one of their ships, we can shut it down. Close enough? I repeated, raising an eyebrow. You mean walk straight into their stronghold and hope they don't vaporize us on sight? That's the idea, Kwan said with a wry smile. Before I could respond, the warehouse door burst open. Torres, one of our scouts, staggered in, blood streaming down his face. They found us, he gasped, collapsing to the ground. The sound of engines roared outside, followed by the metallic clatter of alien drones. Panic surged through the group as we scrambled to grab weapons and equipment. The walls shook as something massive landed nearby, the floor vibrating under our feet. Go! Kwan shouted, shoving the device into my hand. Get this to the rendezvous point. I'll hold them off. But… no time to argue, she snapped, shoving me toward the back exit. Go! I hesitated for a moment, my heart pounding, but then the walls exploded inward, and all hell broke loose. The drones poured in like a swarm, their sleek forms glinting in the dim light as they fired beams of energy that tore through metal and flesh alike. Clutching the device, I bolted for the exit, dodging debris and gunfire. Behind me, I heard Kwan shouting orders, her voice defiant even as the drones closed in. But I didn't look back. I couldn't. Outside, the city was chaos. Fires raged in the distance, and the sky was filled with the hum of alien ships. I weaved through the streets, the device heavy in my arms, my breath coming in ragged gasps. My mind raced, trying to process everything that had happened. Kwan was gone. The cell was destroyed. But the mission wasn't over. I reached the rendezvous point, a hidden bunker beneath the ruins of an old library. Torres was already there, along with a handful of other survivors. Their faces were grim, their eyes filled with the same resolve that burned within me. We have the weapon, I said, placing the device on the table. Now we just need a plan. As we gathered around, sketching out our next move, the ground trembled again. Outside, the ships loomed, their lights scanning the city like searchlights. The invaders were hunting us, and time was running out. But for the first time since they arrived, we had a chance. A chance to fight back. A chance to reclaim our world. The architects of destruction had begun their work. The world had changed overnight, and not just in the physical sense. Entire cities had been reduced to alien compounds, their human inhabitants turned into hollow-eyed drones, shadows of who they once were. The invaders' psychic network held them in a trance, moving and working like puppets on invisible strings. It wasn't enough for these star-born conquerors to claim the Earth. They needed to own our minds too. For the survivors, life was a delicate balance between staying hidden and plotting our resistance. The few who remained free had become expert scavengers, slipping through the cracks of the invaders' surveillance. But survival wasn't enough. Not anymore. The device Kwan had built was our only hope, and though her sacrifice weighed heavily on my conscience, her words echoed in my mind. Get this to the ship. Break their hold. Our hideout deep beneath the ruins of the old library was cramped and stifling, but it had kept us safe so far. The team huddled around the device, its alien surface pulsating faintly with an inner glow. Torres, our scout, paced nervously, his injuries hastily patched with bandages scavenged from a nearby clinic. This thing better work, he muttered, glancing at me. We've already lost too much for it. It'll work, I replied, though I wasn't sure if I was convincing him or myself. Kwan wouldn't have given her life for something that didn't matter. She wouldn't. We have a bigger problem, Celine cut in, her voice sharp and no-nonsense. A former soldier, she was the closest thing we had to a leader now. The drones are sweeping the area. It's only a matter of time before they find this place. What do we do? I asked. Celine leaned over the table, her eyes scanning the city map we'd laid out. The closest mothership is stationed over the old industrial district. If we're going to deploy this device, that's our target. You're talking about going straight into their territory, Torres said, his voice rising with frustration. We don't even know what kind of defenses they have. Better to die trying than wait for them to find us, Celine shot back. This is the fight we signed up for. Not all of us, Torres muttered, but he didn't argue further. The plan was simple on paper. Infiltrate the industrial district, reach the heart of the alien stronghold, and activate the device. In reality, it felt like a suicide mission. The invaders' presence was strongest near their ships, their drones patrolling in endless waves. Worse still, the psychic pressure intensified the closer we got to them, an oppressive force that made it harder to think, to move, to resist. We set out at dawn, moving through the shattered remnants of the city like ghosts. Celine led the way, her military training evident in every precise movement. Torres and I followed close behind, with the rest of our ragtag group bringing up the rear. The device was strapped to my back, its faint hum a constant reminder of the weight of our mission. As we neared the industrial district, the air grew colder, charged with an unnatural energy. The buildings around us were half consumed by alien growths, twisted, organic structures that pulsed with an eerie light. The streets were silent, but we knew better than to trust the calm. Drones ahead, Celine whispered, raising her hand to signal a stop. I crouched behind a wrecked car, my heart pounding as the unmistakable whir of alien machinery grew louder. 3 drones hovered into view, their sleek forms scanning the area with beams of blue light. Celine gestured for us to stay put before slipping away into the shadows. Moments later, a sharp, metallic clang echoed from a nearby alley. The drones immediately turned, their beams narrowing on the source of the noise. It was a distraction, and it worked. As the drones moved away, we crept past them, our breaths shallow and our movements slow. Close call, Torres muttered as we regrouped a few blocks later. Stay focused, Celine snapped. We're not out of this yet. The heart of the industrial district was unrecognizable. The factories and warehouses that once dominated the landscape were now overshadowed by an alien spire that pierced the clouds. It pulsed with an otherworldly energy, its surface alive with shifting patterns. This was it, the core of the invaders' operations in the region, and our target. We found cover in the ruins of an old manufacturing plant, peering out at the spire. Alien soldiers patrolled the area, their elongated forms moving with inhuman grace. Unlike the drones, these were living beings, and their presence sent a chill down my spine. Their movements were almost ceremonial, as if they were guardians of something sacred. How do we get past them? Torres asked, his voice barely audible. Celine's jaw tightened. We create a distraction. Draw them away from the spire long enough for someone to get inside. Someone? I repeated, already dreading the answer. You're the one carrying the device, she said, her eyes locking onto mine. If anyone can activate it, it's you. I swallowed hard, my mouth dry. And what about you? We'll cover you, she replied, her tone leaving no room for argument. Just focus on getting inside. Before I could protest, she was already organizing the others, assigning roles and positions. It wasn't long before we were ready, or as ready as we could be. The distraction worked almost too well. Explosions rocked the outskirts of the district as Celine and the others engaged the patrols, drawing their attention away from the spire. I used the chaos to slip through the defenses, my heart racing with every step. The entrance to the spire was a seamless, black surface, its alien material rippling under my touch. As if sensing my presence, it opened with a soft hiss, revealing a tunnel bathed in an unsettling green light. I hesitated for only a moment before stepping inside, the device strapped securely to my back. The interior of the spire was unlike anything I had ever seen. Organic and mechanical elements fused together, the walls pulsing like a living organism. Strange symbols glowed faintly, their meaning just out of reach, as if they were teasing the edge of my comprehension. The psychic pressure was overwhelming here, a weight pressing down on my mind with every step. I followed the tunnel deeper into the spire, the device growing warmer against my back. I didn't know how much time I had before the invaders realized I was here, but I couldn't afford to hesitate. My mission was clear: reach the core and deploy the device. The core was a chamber of pure energy, a swirling vortex suspended in the center of the room. It pulsed with a rhythmic thrum, the source of the invaders' psychic network. The moment I entered, I felt its presence in my mind, a voice so vast and ancient it defied understanding. "You are insignificant," it whispered, its tone dripping with contempt. "Your resistance is futile." I gritted my teeth, forcing myself to move forward. The device in my hands flared to life, its glow intensifying as I approached the vortex. The voice grew louder, more insistent, but I pushed it aside, focusing only on the task at hand. With trembling hands, I placed the device at the base of the vortex. Its energy surged, the alien patterns on its surface aligning with those of the core. A low hum filled the chamber, building to a deafening crescendo. "You cannot defeat us," the voice boomed, its fury shaking the very walls of the spire. "We are eternal." I pressed the activation switch. For a moment there was silence. Then, the device unleashed a blinding pulse of energy, a wave that tore through the chamber and rippled outward. The psychic pressure vanished, replaced by a deafening roar as the vortex began to collapse. The spire shuddered violently, cracks spiderwebbing across its surface. I turned and ran, the walls crumbling around me as the device did its work. Behind me, the vortex imploded, sending shock waves that shook the entire district. Outside, the alien forces faltered. The soldiers stumbled, clutching their heads as the psychic network collapsed. Drones fell from the sky, their lights dimming as they crashed to the ground. The invaders' grip on Earth was broken. I emerged from the ruins, battered and exhausted but alive. Celine and the others were waiting, their faces a mixture of relief and determination. The fight wasn't over, not yet. But for the first time we had hope. We had struck the first blow, and the architects of their destruction were just getting started. The first blow had been struck, and for the first time in years, humanity wasn't just surviving, we were fighting back. Across the globe, reports flooded in of alien forces faltering, their psychic network in disarray. Cities that had been lost to the invaders began to stir, resistance movements rising from the ashes of despair. But the war was far from over. The destruction of the local psychic network had crippled their operations in our region, but it was only one piece of a far larger machine. Their motherships remained in orbit, massive, ominous sentinels that loomed over the Earth like grim reminders of our fragility. And though the invaders were reeling, they were far from defeated. Celine didn't give us time to rest. "This is our window," she said, her voice carrying the weight of command. "They're weak, but they'll recover. We need to strike again before they reorganize." "How?" Torres asked, his skepticism palpable. "We barely survived that last mission. Now you want us to take on the motherships?" Celine didn't flinch. "We have the device, and we have momentum. Quan's design worked once. We'll make it work again." The weeks that followed were a blur of preparation. The alien spire's collapse had left behind fragments of their technology, strange, crystalline shards that pulsed faintly with residual energy. We scavenged what we could, repurposing their own tools against them. Engineers, scientists, and survivors with any technical knowledge worked tirelessly to modify Quan's device, adapting it for a far more ambitious target: the mothership. Our efforts were not without their cost. The invaders, though weakened, began to retaliate. Their drones returned in greater numbers, their patrols more aggressive. They seemed determined to eradicate the resistance before we could gain further ground. Every supply run was a gamble, every movement a risk. We lost good people. Too many, but the device was our only chance, and we couldn't afford to fail. The day of the mission arrived faster than any of us were ready for. The plan was audacious. Infiltrate the primary alien launch complex on the outskirts of the city, where the invaders had constructed a massive tower that served as a tether to their mothership. If we could deliver the modified device to the tower's core, its energy would be transmitted directly to the mothership, disrupting their systems on a scale far greater than anything we'd achieved before. Celine gathered the team for one final briefing. Her voice was steady, but the tension in the room was palpable. "This is it," she said, her gaze sweeping over us. "We've fought, we've bled, and we've lost people we cared about. But this is our chance to end this war. To take back our world." None of us spoke, but the determination in the room was unmistakable. The launch complex was a fortress. Alien soldiers patrolled the perimeter, their movements precise and methodical. Towering constructs, part organic and part machine, loomed over the area, their eyes scanning for intruders. And above it all, the tether stretched into the sky, a glowing, pulsing conduit that connected Earth to the mothership. Our infiltration team was small. Too small, it felt, but it was all we had. Celine led the way, her movements silent and calculated. Torres and I followed close behind, the device securely packed in a reinforced case strapped to my back. The rest of the team remained at a distance, ready to create a diversion when the time came. The first hurdle was the perimeter defenses. The invaders had erected a series of barriers, pulsating with energy, that formed an impenetrable wall around the complex. Celine signaled for us to hold as she examined the defenses, her sharp eyes searching for any weakness. "There," she whispered, pointing to a section where the energy field flickered intermittently. "That's our way in." We moved quickly but cautiously, timing our approach with the flickering of the field. Torres and I held our breath as Celine disabled the small alien device that controlled the barrier, her hands moving with practiced precision. The field shimmered and vanished, and we slipped through before it could reactivate. Inside the complex, the air was thick with tension. The alien architecture was as unsettling as ever, twisting, organic shapes that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. The corridors were dimly lit, the walls lined with strange, glowing symbols that seemed to shift and change as we passed. Celine led us deeper into the complex, her weapon at the ready. Every step felt like a gamble, every shadow a potential threat. The invaders' psychic presence was stronger here, an oppressive weight that gnawed at the edges of my mind. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to focus. We encountered our first patrol near the central chamber. 3 alien soldiers, their elongated forms moving with unnerving grace, emerged from a side corridor. Celine reacted instantly, raising her weapon and firing a burst of suppressed rounds that took down the first soldier before it could react. Torres and I followed suit, our shots finding their mark. The skirmish was over in seconds, but the noise would almost certainly draw more attention. "Move!" Celine barked, and we pressed forward, our pace quickening. The central chamber was a sprawling, cavernous space dominated by the base of the tether. The conduit pulsed with energy, its glow casting eerie shadows across the room. Alien machinery surrounded it, a complex network of cables and devices that defied comprehension. Celine gestured for us to take cover as she surveyed the chamber. "The core is beneath the tether," she said. "That's where we need to place the device." "How do we get to it?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "We improvise," she replied, a hint of a grim smile on her face. Our presence didn't go unnoticed for long. Alarms blared, a high-pitched wail that made my skin crawl. Alien soldiers poured into the chamber, their movements precise and coordinated. Celine and Torres opened fire, their shots echoing through the space as I crouched behind cover, clutching the device. "Go!" Celine shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Get to the core!" I didn't hesitate. Clutching the device tightly, I sprinted toward the tether, weaving through the alien machinery as beams of energy sliced through the air around me. My heart pounded in my chest, every step feeling like it could be my last. The core was a swirling, pulsating mass of energy, its glow almost blinding. I dropped to my knees, fumbling with the device as the invaders closed in around me. The psychic pressure was overwhelming here, a relentless assault on my mind that made it hard to think, to breathe. "You will not succeed," the alien voice boomed, a chorus of contempt that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Your resistance is meaningless." I gritted my teeth, forcing the device into place. Its surface flared to life, the alien patterns aligning with those of the core. The voice grew louder, more furious, but I ignored it, focusing only on the task at hand. The device activated with a deafening pulse, a shock wave of energy that rippled outward and engulfed the core. The tether shuddered violently, cracks spreading across its surface as the energy destabilized. Above us, the mothership reacted. Its massive form pulsed with light, its defenses faltering as the connection was severed. The alien soldiers in the chamber faltered, clutching their heads as the psychic network collapsed. The explosion was inevitable. The tether imploded, sending a wave of destruction that tore through the chamber. I felt a pair of hands grab me, Celine, and the next thing I knew we were running, the world collapsing around us. We emerged into the open air just as the mothership began to fall. Its massive form, once an unassailable symbol of their dominance, now burned as it descended toward the earth. The sight was both terrifying and exhilarating. For the first time, we had struck a blow that couldn't be ignored. The invaders weren't invincible. They could bleed, and we would make sure they did. The war wasn't over, but the tide was turning. And humanity? We were no longer mere survivors. We were the architects of their destruction. The mothership's fiery descent painted the sky in hues of crimson and gold. Even from miles away, the sheer size of the falling behemoth was staggering, a testament to the invaders' dominance now undone. The ground trembled beneath our feet as debris rained from the heavens, scattering alien wreckage across the desolate landscape. It should have felt like a victory, but there was no time to celebrate. Celine hauled me to my feet, her face streaked with dirt and blood, her expression fierce. "We're not done yet," she shouted over the cacophony of destruction. I nodded, adrenaline surging through my veins. The tether's destruction had destabilized the mothership, but the alien forces were still active. We needed to escape the blast radius and regroup before they mounted a counterattack. Torres and the rest of the team emerged from the smoke, coughing and battered but alive. "We need to move," he said, urgency lacing his words. "Their ground troops are regrouping, and we've got company inbound." Celine didn't hesitate. "Fall back to the rendezvous point. Quan's team will be waiting with extraction. Stay sharp. This isn't over yet." The journey to the extraction point was a gauntlet of chaos. Alien drones filled the sky, their searchlights cutting through the smoke and debris. Every step felt like a gamble, every shadow a potential ambush. The invaders were relentless, their movements more erratic now that their psychic network had been disrupted. We ducked through the ruins of the launch complex, using the alien architecture as cover. The once imposing structures now lay in disarray, their twisted forms sparking with residual energy. Torres led the way, his keen eyes scanning for threats, while Celine and I held the rear. My mind reeled with the weight of what we'd accomplished and the dangers still ahead. A deafening roar shattered the uneasy silence. A massive alien construct, one of their biomechanical war machines, emerged from the rubble. Its multi-limbed form glowed with an eerie, pulsating light, and its movements were unervingly precise. "Scatter!" Celine ordered, and we broke into a sprint as the machine unleashed a barrage of energy blasts that tore through the ruins. I dove behind a collapsed wall, the heat from the blasts scorching the air around me. Celine and Torres opened fire, their weapons doing little more than denting the machine's armor. We were outmatched, and we knew it. "We can't fight that thing head-on," Torres shouted. Celine's eyes darted toward a nearby fuel depot, its alien energy tanks glowing faintly. A spark of determination lit her face. We don't have to. Cade, you've got the best arm. Can you hit one of those tanks? I swallowed hard, nodding as I reached for a grenade. The machine was closing in, its limbs tearing through the rubble with terrifying ease. I took a deep breath, steadied my hand, and lobbed the grenade with everything I had. The explosion was deafening. The depot erupted in a violent inferno, engulfing the war machine in a cascade of fire and shrapnel. Its agonized screech echoed through the ruins before it collapsed in a smoldering heap. "Nice shot," Celine called, motioning for us to keep moving. "That'll buy us some time." The extraction point was a battered outpost nestled in a canyon on the outskirts of the city. Quan and his team had managed to cobble together a makeshift landing zone, shielded by the surrounding cliff. The sight of the transport ship waiting for us was a beacon of hope in the chaos. But the invaders weren't giving up. As we approached, the ground trembled, and the air grew heavy with the hum of their approach. Swarms of drones and foot soldiers emerged from the horizon, their numbers overwhelming. Celine turned to us, her expression grim. "Get to the ship. I'll hold them off." "No way," I said, stepping forward. "We're not leaving you behind." "This isn't up for debate," she snapped. "You've got the data and you've seen what they're capable of. If we fail now, everything we've done will mean nothing." Torres placed a hand on my shoulder. "She's right, Cade. We need to go." I hated it, but I knew she was right. With a reluctant nod, I turned and sprinted toward the transport, Torres at my side. Behind us, Celine held her ground, her weapon blazing as she faced the oncoming horde. The transport's engines roared to life as we boarded, the pilot shouting for us to strap in. Quan was there, his face etched with worry. "Where's Celine?" he asked, though the answer was already clear. "She stayed behind to buy us time," I said, my voice heavy with guilt. Quan didn't press further. Instead, he turned to the pilot. "Get us in the air. Now." As the transport lifted off, I looked back at the battlefield below. Celine was a lone figure amidst the chaos, her defiance a symbol of everything we were fighting for. The invaders swarmed around her, but she didn't falter. The mothership finally collapsed, its massive form disintegrating in a cataclysmic explosion that lit up the night sky. The shockwave rocked the transport, and I gripped my seat as the ship struggled to stabilize. Did we do it?" Torres asked, his voice barely audible. "We did," Quan said, though his tone was somber. "But the war isn't over. Not yet." The victory was bittersweet. We had struck a devastating blow against the invaders, but the cost was immeasurable. Celine's sacrifice weighed heavily on all of us, a stark reminder of the price of resistance. Yet her bravery ignited something in humanity, a spark of hope, a refusal to surrender. As we regrouped at a hidden base deep in the mountains, the remnants of the resistance began to plan their next move. The invaders had underestimated us once, and we would make sure they never did again. The stars still loomed above, silent witnesses to our struggle. But they no longer seemed so distant, so untouchable. The invaders had come from the stars to control us. Now we would become architects of their destruction.